Okay, let's talk about cerebral palsy. It's a term you've probably heard thrown around, right? But what does it actually mean? Well, today, we're going to demystify it. We'll get right to the core of what it is, where it starts, and what it really looks like.
To really wrap our heads around this, I want you to picture something. Think of the brain as this incredible, superpowered command center for your whole body. It's sending out lightning-fast instructions for every single move you make. But what if those instructions get scrambled? You know, like a garbled signal right at the very beginning. Maybe even before someone is born. That's exactly the idea we're diving into.
All right, so let's start with the absolute foundation. To get what cerebral palsy is, you have to know this. It's a brain-based movement disorder. It all starts in the brain. Okay, that's a pretty official-sounding definition, I know. But there are a couple of phrases in there that are super important to pull out. First, group of disorders. That tells you right away this isn't just one single thing. And second, damage to the developing brain. This is huge. It means the issue originates in the brain, not in the muscles themselves. Now this next point, this is so important because it busts a really common misconception. Ready? It's non-progressive. That means the original injury to the brain doesn't get worse over time. Now, don't get me wrong, a person's symptoms can change as they get older, but that underlying cause, it's stable. So that leads to a pretty obvious next question, right? If it happens in the developing brain, what's actually going on in there? At its very core, what we're talking about is a disruption. Something gets in the way of the brain's normal development, especially in the parts that control movement, balance, and posture. It's like the wiring in that command center we talked about gets interrupted or damaged.
So, what could cause a disruption like that? Well, it could be a few different things. We're talking about stuff like damage to the brain's white matter, maybe some bleeding in the brain, or even a lack of oxygen at a critical time. Sometimes genetic or developmental abnormalities can play a role too.
Okay, so we've got the what and the why. But what does cerebral palsy actually look like day to day? Well, because the brain is just so incredibly complex and the injury can affect different spots, the signs can be, well, dramatically different from person to person.
Yeah, the variety is huge. It all comes down to which parts of the brain were affected and how much. There's really no one-size-fits-all blueprint for how this shows up.
So let's look at the main signs you might see. They all have to do with movement and muscle tone. The most common one is something called spasticity, which is basically stiff muscles. You might also see poor coordination, that's ataxia, or maybe some tremors or involuntary movements. And this can impact all sorts of things, from the way someone walks, you might see toe walking or a scissoring gait, all the way to a person's ability to do really precise things, fine motor tasks, like something as simple as buttoning up a shirt. And because it all starts in the brain, it makes sense that other brain-controlled functions can sometimes be affected too. We're talking about things like speech or swallowing difficulties, maybe some vision or hearing problems. And yeah, in some cases, you might see an intellectual disability or seizures. But, and this is a big but, not everyone with CP has these other issues. It really varies.
So with all this variety, how do we make sense of it all? Well, doctors have a system. They classify cerebral palsy into 4 main types, and it's mostly based on the kind of movement problem a person has.
And boom, this chart tells the story pretty clearly. Look at that massive piece of the pie, 80%. That's spastic CP. It is by far the most common type. The other 3, dyskinetic, ataxic, and mixed, all fit into that remaining 20%.
So, what's the difference? Well, it's pretty straightforward when you break it down. Spastic CP, that's the one with stiff muscles and awkward movements. Dyskinetic is all about those uncontrollable movements. Ataxic? Think balance and coordination problems. And mixed CP? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like, a combination of the others.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground. So let's boil it all down. What's the most important stuff to remember?
In fact, if you remember only one thing from our entire conversation today, let it be this next fact.
Here it is again. Cerebral palsy is non-progressive. The brain injury itself does not get worse. This is so crucial for understanding the condition. It's a lifelong condition, yes, but it's a stable one. This quote really nails it. It's the perfect one-sentence summary. An early brain development injury leads to lifelong but non-progressive problems with movement, tone, and posture. That's it. That's the whole story in a nutshell. So just knowing that CP is a non-progressive, brain-based movement disorder, that's a massive step, right?
It helps demystify it completely. It shifts our whole perspective from thinking of it as something that gets worse to seeing it as a stable condition. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Now that we know the basics, how can this understanding change our perspective?